Hey guys, Joe here of the Joe Madden Sports Podcast, joined this afternoon by Carita Parks, freelance reporter and owner of Double Take Sports. Carita, how's the day treating you so far? And welcome to the show.
So far, so good, TGIF, and thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. First time here, so I'm excited.
I'm excited to have you here too. And TGIF, that is a slogan I haven't heard for a while. I love that.
That's
I
how
miss
I'm
those good
feeling.
old days of no worries in our lives and just sitting down and watching these TGIF shows.
Right, yeah. So life isn't like that as much anymore, but I am still happy it's Friday.
Absolutely. Well, you have so much going on. We're going to be talking the NBA. We're going to be talking your Washington Commanders. But before we get into that, let's talk about you. Let's talk how you got into the business. And first, before you start that, can you tell everyone where to find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me at Carita C. Parks. That is my personal handle, but I also post all of my work, all my freelance work. You can also find me at DBL Take Sports. That is my sports media company. We cover the WNBA, NBA, and NFL over there. So be sure to follow that for all of your sports. And then as far as my story, it's a little non-traditional. So my background is actually in PR. And a couple years ago, I started my own PR company, Parts PR, but my passion was still sports. So I went down the road of sports PR and worked with a lot of different clients. I have Penny Hardaway's radio show. I also did some work with Super Bowl. And I ended up linking up with like an online sports blog, and they also had access to like Super Bowl draft. I did some PR for one of their Super Bowl in Arizona, actually. I was doing PR for some of their events. And I just ended up being in the atmosphere, and it kind of took me back to my days where I used to want to do more broadcast journalism. But I wrote stories and things, and I was like, you know what? I want to kind of like dabble into writing and the sports journalism, but still do PR. So it's interesting. I told her that I wanted to do some writing for her blog. She was like, okay. And it ended up taking on a life of its own. Like my first assignment was the NFL draft in Chicago. Then I ended up I've covered multiple Super Bowls at this point, a few other drafts. And then it spiraled into local, where I now cover the Commanders, as we kind of mentioned, also the Wizards and the Washington Mystics. So it just took off, and I ended up loving it. And now I branched out on my own with Double Take Sports, because after a while, I felt like it was something I had enough relationships, enough knowledge. I felt like it was something that I could do. So I gave it a try. And I'm just a natural entrepreneur as well. So
I love it. Okay, we're going to go back to Double Take Sports. But before we do that, you have to tell me what it's like to cover a Super Bowl. What was that
oh
like?
man, that's a really good question. It's it can be overwhelming your first time because there's just so much going on. I'm trying to think which one was my first one that I actually covered. I think it was Houston.
Okay.
But there's just so much going on. Opening night is a zoo. So that's when all the players do their first media availability. And it's a zoo, like seriously. When I went into that atmosphere, suddenly I had to snap into almost like a shark mode. You cannot be timid in that situation if you want to get your questions and your
Yep.
stories. So it just kind of flipped for me. And then, but it also gave me confidence that I could do it, especially when the players react to your questions positively. And then from there, it's just a ton of different events. You have to really have a plan, know what's going on ahead of time, and follow that plan. And then there's media availabilities, which I did not know at that time. Every single day, pretty much, they only don't have media availabilities like that Friday, because then they
Okay.
start really focusing on practice. But yeah, I just didn't know the players had availability every day, and then they're
Wow.
answering the same questions. It's kind of funny. Probably not for them, but for me, I'm like, gosh,
Yeah.
everybody's asking the same questions. But yeah, you really have to have a plan and know what your goals are, because there's a ton of things going on really at the same time.
So, out of all of your interviews with all the different athletes, Super Bowl or not, was there one athlete that really stood out?
Oh man, that's a good question. I don't There's a lot of guys that I've talked to that I've enjoyed talking
Yep.
to. When you asked me that question, the first person that popped in my mind was Richard Sherman, because
Okay.
I asked him about like how he got the confidence that he has gotten, as far as something along the lines of the confidence that he's gotten, because he's always speaking out,
Yep.
and he's has his own quirks, and he was just like really honest, and he was like, I was always a weird kid, and it was just a very like authentic answer. So I really enjoyed having that conversation with him. And then locally, John Wall, I covered him for a very long time, and I know that he can get a bad rap in the media because he likes to go out and whatever, but he was really a cornerstone in the DC community. I mean, the community really loved John Wall, and he did things for the community, but he was also a great person to talk to and interview. So just off the top of my head, those are like the two that kind of came to my mind first.
Okay, I love it. You always want those two that come to your mind when you don't have to really think about it, those ones that stand out for sure. Now, let's move back to Double Take Sports.
Mm-hmm.
So you were with a PR company, you decided to go out on your own. Can you tell us exactly what you're doing there?
Double Take Sports?
Yeah, tell us more about Double Take Sports.
Double Take Sports, essentially just think of it as a smaller version of like an ESPN or a Bleacher Report. My goal is still growing, so there's still a lot more work to do. But for the most part, I cover, like I said, the NBA, the WNBA, NFL as a reporter. And I am also looking for writers because I don't want it to just be my perspective. But one of the reasons I started Double Take Sports is because I wanted to, because I have that PR background, sometimes I see these sports stories from a different side. So I wanted it to be a site that has some more like thought-provoking articles. So I try to write some thought pieces. I just did one on mental health awareness and how athletes speaking out can actually encourage others to speak out, because athletes are always seen as superhuman. So if you're someone who is dealing with a mental health struggle, that may encourage you to go get help or not feel ashamed about it. So I just wrote that article. My company, we also just covered the WNBA draft, so I was there for that. We also covered the Mystics, so reporting for that. So really, it's like I said, it's a sports media company. It's growing, but we have online interviews, articles, and we're covering teams and leagues. And I feel very proud of that because it's only 2 years old at this point.
I am so proud of you for that. What an incredible job you've done to build it so quickly in the last few years. And I'm so glad that you're focusing on different things, the mental health aspect as well. You gave me chills when you said that because it's so true.
Mm-hmm.
We look up to athletes, and when they're good role models and when they speak out about their issues, it makes the general public have someone to listen to and have someone to look up to. Like, they still struggle with this as well. So
Absolutely.
Thank you for doing that. Now,
welcome.
Growing up, did you play sports, or where did the passion for sports come from?
Growing up, my sport was track and field. I was a sprinter, actually 100, 200, and 4x100. So I had that competitive nature. But then also my mom, she was really into sports, as far as just watching all kinds of sports. She watched tennis, football, basketball. So just being in that household, I kind of got immersed in it as well. And so my passion kind of was a combination of just being immersed in it with my mother, and then my own track and field background.
I love it. So let's talk some NBA. We have game 2 on Sunday for the Boston Celtics and the Golden State Warriors. We know Boston was able to get the win in game 1. What are you thinking for the second game? Do you think Boston will be able to do it again?
Oh, it will be tough. It'll definitely be tough. I think the Warriors have a chip on their shoulder after the way that they lost. I mean, they just completely collapsed in that fourth quarter. But then at the same time, you kind of saw Boston expose their weaknesses. So I do think the Warriors are going to, they know that they have to tie it up. They know that they cannot go to Boston down 2 games. So I think we're going to see them pull it off because they're going to have a little bit of additional fight. I mean, Steph Curry was already talking about like having to wait 2 days, knowing how
Yeah.
important game 2 is. So I think they're going to come out with a little bit more tenacity. However, I still can't put it past Boston to pull another upset, but I do think the Warriors are going to have some focus and motivation because they know they can't go into Boston down 2 games.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's hope so for Washington.
Yes.
Or sorry, Warriors fans there. I was already wanting to talk your
I'm so
Washington
used
Commanders.
to Washington, so I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, I am so excited to talk your Washington Commanders. I want to hear your thoughts on the team for the upcoming year. We were talking off screen how Chase Young looks like he's rehabbing well and should be good in this season. What are you thinking here of your quarterback issue and everything that's going on?
So the Washington Commanders' biggest issue has been inconsistency on offense, especially at that quarterback position. Carson Wentz, if he can remain healthy for the year, he is going to be an upgrade at that position. We can't forget he was once an MVP caliber quarterback. He still has that in him, but those injuries and just bad situations have really impacted his ability to have that success again. But he has an arm. He's opening up the offense. We see that in OTAs. He's able to open up the offense. He's able to get the ball downfield. And with Terry McLaurin, who's sitting out waiting for his contract to be renegotiated, which I'm sure Washington will take care of. But with Terry McLaurin, you have Curtis Samuel possibly being healthy this year. Diami Brown, they just drafted Jahan Dotson. So they're loading up. They loaded up on weapons. So if we can see them match that offense with the defense that we've seen, I think Washington has a pretty good chance. Their schedule is they have one of the weakest schedules in the league. I think it's like the 4th weakest schedule in the league. So if they can put it all together, they can have a pretty good record.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love your points on the defense. The offense just has to step up here. What are your thoughts on Taylor Heinicke? We saw him last season. If he has to step on the field for Carson Wentz, because we know Wentz has had injury issues, do you have more confidence in him now?
Yeah, I mean, Taylor Heinicke, as a starter, he didn't see as much success as they were hoping, but he is a very solid backup. He can give you probably 5 or 6 games. And that's what's really good about this team also. So I'm glad you brought that up. They have more depth at quarterback finally, because they, like I said, they have been struggling, but they have Carson Wentz as a starter, Taylor Heinicke as a backup. They just drafted Sam Howell. Hopefully we don't get down to a 3rd quarterback having to come on, but they have depth there. And I definitely think Taylor Heinicke can step up if he gets hurt. I mean, Heinicke can even give you half of a season. Yeah. So it's just those 16 games is just not his thing because he is more of a fit as a backup.
Absolutely. Now your Washington Mystics, they are playing tonight against New York. How do you think they're going to do?
I think they'll do well. New York actually is still struggling to find their way a bit. The Mystics are off to a fairly strong start. They've lost 3 games so far. I had to just make sure, but yeah, so far they've only lost 3 games. They are also still trying to gel as an offense, and that's what's interesting is they're still playing very well, but also still trying to find their rhythm. At times, coach has been like, our rhythm's a little off. We're not coming together. We saw that when they played the Chicago Sky, but I think they'll be fine tonight, and I think they'll have a pretty good season overall too.
Yeah, let's hope. It looks like they're sitting in 2nd place right now in the WNBA. So that is fantastic to hear. I honestly don't follow women's basketball, but it's something that I really should start following because I caught a game the other night and I couldn't believe how incredible these women are playing.
You're right. They play incredibly. And I actually started with the Wizards, but then I decided, hey, you know what? Let me just take it on over to the Mystics too and keep this going. And so the first year I covered them was the year they won the WNBA championship. So the Mystics are actually a really good team to cover.
Well, that is great to hear. Well, Carita, I know you have a ton of things to do today. Can you remind everyone where to follow you on socials as well as Double Take Sports?
Yes, definitely follow me at Carita C. Parks, and you can also follow Double Take Sports at DBL Take Sports, and the website is dbltakesports.com. So make sure you go there and read some articles.
Absolutely. You guys head on over, Carita. It was an absolute pleasure having you here today. Thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Bye, guys. I'll be back for another Joe Madden Sports podcast. Thank you.